This episode is sponsored by JDAQA Software Testing, your scalable solution for manual, automated, security, and performance testing. Check us out at jdaqa.com. And with that, let's get on with the show.
This is The First Customer, hosted by Jay Agner.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the First Customer Podcast. My name is Jay Agner. Today, I'm lucky enough to be joined by Det Anson. He has a million things after his name. He's the founder of Brick Simple. It's been going for 25 years. Serial entrepreneur, 4 successful exits. He's part of Startup Bucks, or was at some point, mentor, investor, strategic advisor. Good Lord, everything, Det. And he also rides a motorcycle. How are you, buddy?
Doing great, doing great. It's a long list. It's the kind of thing that's difficult to explain at a family barbecue.
Yes. What do you say? Like, if people say, what do you do? What do you tell them?
I do things. I mean, at the point of my career where I like doing things that for me it's enjoyable. Like you want to, when you get to that point, and when you're young, you focus so much on how much money I would make doing this thing or that. I mean, for me, I just want to work with amazing people and do cool stuff. And that's
I
the
love that.
prime directive for me at the stage of my career.
And you're also the CEO of a MedTech company called Neuralert, which is where I think, where did you say you guys are today? Where's your office down there?
I'm in Philadelphia today. Yeah. Down
Okay.
at Patient.
Pennovation. Okay. Yes. All right. Well, where did you grow up, and did that have any impact on you being an entrepreneur?
I did most of my growing up right here in Bucks County, PA. I graduated Central Bucks West many years ago. I mean, for me, it gave me opportunities. Was fortunate. I've been writing code since 1977. I had a consulting gig in 81 and 82. I was a young lad, young lad. And when I first moved to Pennsylvania, I ended up pumping gas at the Doylestown Airport.
Nice.
And doing that, what it was actually is exposure to a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business owners. And one day, one of those entrepreneurs saw me wearing my Drexel orientation t-shirt and said, with your work ethic, I want you to go work for me. And that was Tom Jatico. He had a company called Atlantic Science Technology, and I ended up doing amazing things on military platforms and doing that. But so much of it in the pre-online days, I mean, it was about who you met, who you knew in your network. I mean, if I wasn't pumping gas at the Doylestown Airport, I never would have met the entrepreneurs I met back in the day.
So much about that I love, most of which that I fly out of Doylestown for my pilot training and get fueled up there all the time. So thank you for your service, I guess I should say, for something like that. Well, it's an interesting point. What's like the biggest thing that's the same and the biggest thing that's different, kind of building a network in 2025? Obviously, we're connected and all this stuff, but from a human perspective, is it kind of the same? Do you still have to kind of you had to put yourself out back there back then, you had to do it, and you have to do the same thing today? What's the same?
I think one of the things, and I caution founders on this all the time, I've been an advisor for different accelerators, is that sometimes people get overly transactional. And that's very easy to do online and drift into that transactionality kind of mindset. Like I do something, you give me something, vice versa. And I think when you look at the in-person and the IRL type interactions, that if you are that transactional person, no one will want to spend time with you. And you could try being that person on LinkedIn or other social media. And the reality is, I think there's something to be said for those authentic connections that people do make. And, whether it's like flying or whether that's motorcycling, whether it's you're playing golf, but there's authentic connections that people make that you can have all this whiz bang technology. And that's the stuff I think that really builds connections with folks.
So with such a illustrious career, I don't think that we could even scratch the surface on all of it, but you went to work for a guy you met at the airport, did a bunch of cool stuff. When did you start doing more entrepreneurial stuff? What was the first business that you kind of officially started that was a real business?
So that company, I was doing this amazing work for the military contractor, and it was acquired by another company. And they were trying to figure out who was this young guy who was paid so well and what was he doing. And what really kicked me out of the nest was that they came in and said, well, I really don't fit with my years of experience, the comp they were giving me. I left that to join a startup. And I joined a startup with a couple other founders, and we grew that company. And it was as we're growing that company, I think for me, I come from the technologist cast of things. That's where I come from. So I was looking at these things. Well, I could do these business pieces better. I could do this. So I'm building up business here and doing that. But with my partners, weren't really gelling on where that future direction was going. And for me, it was that experience and the experience working for the other company as well that so you know I think I can do these things with my own flavor. I want to make a place where people like me would want to work. And that's what led me to leaving that partnership at the end of 2001 to start Brick Simple. It was driven by my desire to create that environment and do that. And it's funny is it didn't start out as a profit motive kind of thing. I was making lots of bank with that other position, but it was really tied into this idea of I wanted to be able to define a culture that would be a place that I'd want to work at.
I feel like I maybe know the answer to this just from inferring details, but why the name Brick Simple?
Kind of came from the vernacular as being simple like a brick and modular. It was a name that I was using for shareware that I was writing back in the early 90s. And I decided to use I had the domain name, so I decided to put it to use for this company.
Who was your first customer?
It was interesting. I when I was at the prior startup, I was in DC and our flights where we were flying from DC all got canceled and we had to go ride up back up to Doylestown. And a guy I rode in the car with, we were only acquaintances in the meeting, like, hey, we'll go up here. I need to get up to New York and we hopped in a car together. And naturally, with that DC traffic, it was like a 7, 8 hour drive. It was a ridiculous drive. And I had met him in that, and there wasn't anything that we were doing in that prior startup context. But when I started Brick Simple, we had a product, and it happened to be right up his alley. And he ended up being our first customer and was someone who I'd met in a prior life existence and just nice socially. When he learned what we were doing, he wanted to leverage our technology. And Brick Simple started out with a software product. And that product, he was paying customer number one. So it was in June of 2002, we had our first paying customer.
Did Brick Simple start as a product company or a services company?
Started as a product company. I had a specific vision. At the time, there was a lot of work that was going offshore, and I had a vision for a technology solution that would reduce the amount of time it would take US-based developers to write software and code. So our
Hmm.
solution resulted in a 70% production efficiency that we were able to move that much faster than traditional development. We invested back in Sun workstations and servers back then to build all that out, and I bankrolled that initial development, the idea of having a product. And in that environment, it's the post-dot-com collapse. 40% of the people who worked in the dot-com era weren't working anymore, and that's how we got some of our amazing talent in those early days.
So walk me through the rest. I mean, because I know you've done a million. What are
Yeah.
the other businesses you started to fast forward us to today? Just from a pure, actual new enterprise kind of perspective.
What happened with Brick Simple is that we had built this product, and in 2007 we were approached by some former Microsoft folks who had a venture-backed company that wanted to acquire the product and technology stack. So in 2008, when the world was burning, we completed a transaction, and that was my first exit. We sold that platform. And at the time, I had something that most people weren't aware of. We had early access to the iPhone SDK.
Hmm.
So I kept with the team that I had going. We were writing apps for the iPhone before people knew you could write apps for the iPhone. When Apple was telling folks to create web apps, we were creating native applications. And
Hmm.
the company ended up putting some of the first apps in the App Store. And one of those apps ended up being my 2011 exit.
Wow. Which one was that?
That was something called Leap Pwn at 1337pdn.com. We had of the 18 million gamers on Xbox Live, 5 million of them at the time were using our application. So I sold that in February of 2011. And 8 months later, Microsoft came out with their own solution, but it was a mobile app that you could see what your friends are playing on Xbox Live.
Hmm.
And it was fun. I did a lot of media. I did MTV. I did all these different things with it. I did morning radio shows. I count it as a period where I had this like, B-lister, C-lister celebrity status, at least in the gaming community.
As a gamer, I do know that app. I don't know that I use it, but I remember it from back then before everything became ultra connected and like you had all
Yeah.
this stuff native, but that's awesome. So I know you've kind of jumped, you kind of told me a little bit of the story about Neuralert earlier. I want to get there, but before we get there, Do you still what's your day-to-day at Brick Simple now, and when did that change, and what transition did you make from kind of a day-to-day CEO to whatever your role there is now?
After I sold the Xbox Live app, the 1337 PWN app. I sold that. I took a break from Brick Simple. And I stepped away from the operations. In my absence, the team grew it by 30%. And for me, I mean, as a position, financial position, like, do I have to work anymore? What do I want to do? But it really, for me, changed what I viewed as my own value in, to the company and what it does. And I clearly, part of the value was that team and culture, building a team culture that could run with things. And I spent my 2012, going all these events. I was doing analysis for Bloomberg Television and really changed my approach and engagement with the company. And after that, while I'm involved with Brick Simple, the day to day, I've got amazing people that run it and make it all happen. And that has allowed me to get involved in numerous other startups and entrepreneurial ventures along the way, including my nearly 2 decades of involvement with technology transfer out of Penn, working with other accelerators, doing those kinds of fun things that also involve technology and entrepreneurship.
I love that. How was your team prepared to carry the torch specifically from a new business, new logo perspective when the man himself leaves the show? What infrastructure did you have or did you build up so that you could step away and you'd be getting new business still?
You need to have the right people around the table. I think you have to do that. But also, I I have my rule of thumb is that if I micromanage things, they will only turn out as well as I can imagine. And part of hiring smart people and having them engage is having people you can trust to see through that vision. And you also have to know when you have to pull the trigger, that person's not going to fit that vision or can't fulfill that. And I think that, culturally is very important because you got to have people, are accountable who want to bring those creative things to the table, but also not trying to micromanage it so much. I mean, part of it is you're really establishing an environment and culture and seeing where it goes from there. And understanding there are people also, then as they go through their careers, there may be folks who initially are such an amazing fit. But over time, we all grow and develop in different ways. Some people become more capable, more robust over time. Some folks plateau. And I think there's a human patience. You have to understand where a person is at in their career. Folks can talk about hard charging, being able to hit every day 110% and that kind of thing. But the reality is there people go through funks. They have, romantic difficulties. They have that. And I think as a manager, you have to recognize that's part of the human experience. That's part of what you're managing, that's part of what you're dealing with. And you have to appreciate that a star player can have a bum few months. And you
Mhm.
have to really work and see them through. We see this in professional sports all the time. You see someone's an Angeles, that can work. And there are wonderful, amazing comebacks. And there's folks where can be profound professional setbacks. It's calling those shots that's the biggest challenge over time. And you still learn over time.
Mhm. No, I love that. That makes a lot of sense. So talk to me last kind of piece about Brick Simple. What management did you have in place that again allowed you to kind of make that clean break? I know you had good people. Did you
Yeah.
have a CEO that was kind of did you have an operation? Like I'm just curious because
Yeah.
that's the if you read Built to Sell, like that's like
Yeah.
you want to have your business in a certain state so that when
Yep.
you leave or whatever, it still it could be acquired or et cetera, et cetera. Who was running the show? Did they have a vision for sales? Like they wanted to grow?
Yeah.
What was the picture there when you left?
You need that vision. In 2019, I mean, we had a number of unsolicited flying offers. Fatefully, in September of 2019, I blew up a process and rejected the final term sheet from a buyer,
Okay.
which had I known the pandemic was rolling along, maybe I would have done that, but it wasn't meeting culturally what I wanted the terms. I think it's just really important. I mean, I viewed it, I had a triumvirate of three people running the company. I did a stint as the CTO of Rogue Fitness, which is strength training CrossFit equipment. I did that for 2 years and 3 months, only leaving that to go to help out the stroke startup. I had a great team of 3 that had the skills to do it. I think the challenge is, as an entrepreneur, I had this discussion with a fellow entrepreneur recently, is that he was trying to find that one magic person that could do all of those things. And the reality is that kind of energy you bring to starting a company, it's really difficult to find one person that
Mm-hmm.
embodies all that wants to carry forward your vision. You really need a team and triumvirate. And right now at Brick Simple, I'm actually helping that team reshuffle that deck a little bit in terms of who can see it forward in this disruptive age of AI, what the company looks like going forward, and actually have different players at the table because the challenges are different than they were, 6 years ago.
All right, so let's talk about Neuralert. What is it? What capacity are you involved? Why are you involved, etc. Just kind of give me the 411 on what Neuralert is.
Yeah. Neuralert is a company with a breakthrough stroke detection technology that can detect when someone's had a stroke. 1 in 4 people will have a stroke. Neuralert's technology provides that ready detection that allows you to get interventions, thrombolytics, mechanical thrombectomy, solve the problem of stroke, and have good outcomes for people versus death and permanent disability. I
Mm,
first got involved with the company back in early 2020 before the pandemic hit. I was approached by the founders. I have another medical wrist-worn medical device under my belt that has a patent where I'm named on the patent. They sought me out to, take this new wrist-worn device. It's 2 disposable bracelets to help them and see it through. And I immediately signed up on board. I joined up as CTO. I helped hire a CEO. And that CEO was responsible for the growth of the company, direction of the company, until they were struck with cancer, 2 different cancers in 2023. And at the time
mm,
I was at Rogue, I told the team at Rogue that I was going to have to step away to focus on this one because they might need me. And by the end of 23, he was declared cancer free. And then last year he passed away. The founders, the investors, other shareholders, they asked if I would step in. I'd say step in. The CEO is a friend. And for me, obviously there's fiduciary mission at play, but also see through with everything that my friend put through while getting treatments and going through his cancer therapies, was still putting all of his energy he could into the company. So I've been at the helm for a year. It's been a hugely productive year. We concluded our pilot study. We're currently wrapping up a raise. I feel very fortunate with the people around it. And for me, I from the onset, it's all about working with amazing people, doing highly impactful things. And if we can provide more timely intervention for stroke in places like hospitals, which are actually terrible places to have strokes because they're so
mm.
slow in detecting it, that if we can improve outcomes for patients and do that, I think it's a great mission. And the founders of this company, Dr. Steve Messe and Dr. Jim Weimer, are fantastic folks and friends.
What's the difference for you as a founder? And it's a little bit different because you're kind of stepping in for a found. But is there any difference between a company that you founded and the one that you're running today as a CEO?
It's very different. I think even when stepping into it, having founded companies, enterprises before, coming in and inheriting things. And there were things I inherited where we had investors who hadn't had any communications recently. That there were things that were, just by a function of the health challenges of the prior CEO that I had to hop in and remedy. And it's interesting when you have that, and he did pass away so suddenly that we even had basics like blocking and tackling with the accounts, getting access to bank accounts
Hmm.
and doing those things. So, I found it to be very different in terms of the challenge. It's a fresh challenge. I'm still up for fresh challenges, but when you're a founder, your emotional investment can be a little different. And sometimes
Hmm.
it can skew your perspective if you're looking at it as a founder CEO. And as an
Mm,
investor, I've seen a lot of founder CEOs where like you just want to grab it's like you got to look objectively at the problem you're solving. So for me coming in, I've had the benefit of 2020 hindsight, but also looking at objectively what we want to accomplish as the company. It's interesting you ask the question because I expected it to be fairly similar to something that started from the get-go, but, there's a lot more triage and block and tackle pieces than you'd expect, especially in the kind of sudden transition that we had.
kind of reminds me of like having your own kid versus adopting one, right? It's like the one you get, you have a kid, you're from scratch, and you know what situations caused what baggage and all sorts of stuff, and maybe you get you adopt a kid that's a couple years old and you have some stuff that you have to pick up that maybe lasts longer than you think just because it's ingrained kind of early in the culture. So I love that kind of perspective. Just to switch gears a little bit, startup bucks.
Yes.
So John Mercer, love John, had him on the
Yep.
podcast, great guy. The startup scene in general, and just like tech in Bucks County, and just for those who are listening who are not familiar, it's 45 minutes north of Philadelphia, very suburbs, kind of spread out. We have farms and country, 5 minutes away, and then we have the Northeast, probably 10 or 15 minutes away, more urban kind of environment. I never got the sense that there's any sort of, even the chambers of commerce and everything, it still all feels so disparate and so spread out and so split. And so, do you feel that way, that like there's a bunch of technologists here that aren't really kind of connected, or like there just seems to be something? Maybe that's what Startup Bucks is kind of trying to do. I'm just curious your thought on, Bucks County specifically, and tying some of these really smart entrepreneurs that we have here that really don't have a resource other than maybe Startup Bucks or Lower Bucks Chamber of Commerce, or whatever part of Bucks you're in, your Chamber of Commerce. Do you feel that kind of disparate technology representation across the county?
I think so. I mean, I'm a founding member, started board member of Startup Bucks. I've been on the board for since the beginning. When John approached me of what he wanted to do, I was all in to help provide an ecosystem here. And I served as board president until I had to step down, taking over for Neuralert after when John departed. For me, I think it's invaluable to remind folks there is a community here. I mean, one of the things that people would ask me is Brick Simple used to have offices in California and up in Massachusetts and Philadelphia. They'd ask me, like, why Bucks County? I said, well, there's so much talent here. There's so much talent that's right here. And, folks talk about Silicon Valley like it's a monolithic thing, but I could be at the Brick Simple office there and drive 2 hours and still be in Silicon Valley and be in the Bay Area. And, often more in traffic. If you were to draw a 2 hour circle around Philadelphia or a 2 hour circle around Bucks County, there are so many people and businesses here. There's so much innovation here. I mean, this is where, you know, folks forget this is where Commodore back in the day in the 70s and 80s was right here in Westchester. You had
Hmm.
MapQuest, one of the earliest components of the internet, was right over here in Lancaster. There is a long history in the region of that innovation, and Philly has produced some unicorns along the way. I mean, in the motorcycle side, you got Revzilla, which is a
Hmm.
massive internationally known name in that space. You've got GoPuff, you've got Spark. I mean, this is a place that has produced some amazing companies. The talent is here, which is a different challenge in other parts of the country where they're trying to attract. The talent is here. And I think it's an asset that people really don't fully appreciate. And when you look at, disruptive changes like those going on in software right now, where it's inspiring more people instead of finding that next W-2 position is maybe I start my own thing now.
Hmm.
And I think those are periods of great opportunity for people in business, technology, and marketing that how do I capture that next thing?
I agree. I still, I feels like there's a missing
Yeah.
community or group here. I don't know what the answer is, but maybe something we should talk about eventually. All right, what do you do to come down from all this? I mean, you're running, 10 different companies over a couple decades. You got all this shit going on. Like you're a busy dude. Like I feel, a little bit of a kindred spirit where it's always just like,
Yeah.
what's the next problem to solve? What are we gonna like? What do you do to come down from that? We mentioned the motorcycle thing, but just in general, like what have you done over? What are your hobbies that you've continued to do? Not just
Yeah.
something maybe you picked up last week. What's something you've continued to do over the years?
I mean, I think for me, it's really important, for your own headspace to do that. And I do bicycling, I do motorcycling for those things, but also the mechanical tinkering of that. I mean, there's, folks write about the idea of having this third place or this thing that you have where it's, you go to work, you go to home, you need a third place. And whether
Mm,
that's a social club environment, if that's some volunteer work that you do, I think it's really good important for perspective because, you know, mental health is such a vital thing in the mix. I mean, I'm here in my mid-50s and I have lost in the past 6 years now 5 friends to suicide.
mm,
And I think there's so much of these things where you can go and have your burdens and do that. And to me it's an unreasonable number.
hmm,
But it's important that you do those things that are grounded, that you're there, that you have that. It's important that as an entrepreneur, you know how to shake the dust off. You may have a rough day, and that means tomorrow just you go on a thing. That's part of the adventure. And I think it's just, the problem with those friends I lost, they weren't people that say, hey, hey, I need some help and do that. Hey, I need to go do this. And I just need to go out and do those things is that you'll never know with those people in your life that may be finding themselves that place. And I think we're
mm,
particularly poor at that. But it's so important for you to do those things for your own mental health. As much I can extol the virtues of pouring yourself in the business, doing all those things. But that doesn't mean when you've got the few moments of grace to go and do that, to give yourself that. And, not to beat yourself up too much on anything because everyone's progress is different, everyone's journey is different. You can go scroll through Instagram and have all that envy, but the reality is no one's posting to LinkedIn that their line of credit got called in from the bank. They're posting this nonsense about their conference or whatnot. And, understanding that you know, you got to keep yourself grounded in that perspective. And there's a lot of in real life stuff which can be a lot more sincere than, somebody's what they focus on. I post very little to my LinkedIn feed for anyone who bothers to follow. It's just a few things here and there because, I'm so busy working. I'm not spending time on that social media grind. But I think it's just really important to stay grounded in that because it's so easy to get buried and overwhelmed. And it's really important that you give yourself that grace and patience with yourself on those things.
Love that very much. Totally agree. I have too many hobbies, and it's a good thing. I like it. I like having to pick that. All right, non-business related, non entrepreneurship, etc. Just debt being debt. Final question: if you could do anything on earth, and you knew you wouldn't fail, what would it be?
I've never had the luxury. I came from very simple roots. I never had the luxury of looking at things that wouldn't fail. But I feel extraordinarily lucky, blessed, whatever nomenclature you want to use, that I'm doing the stuff I get to enjoy. Like I was having this lunch with a friend recently. It's like, Sadet, looking at this your next chapters, what do you want to be doing? It's like, well, basically, I want to work with cool people. I want to do cool things. I want to do startup stuff. I want to help out, support these entrepreneurs, do what I can. And I'll do that as long as I'm physically able. I mean, there's something I look at. I mean, for me, here in my 50s, is that I kind of look down at my fingers and toes, not to be grim. How many summers do you got left? How do you
Mm-hmm.
want to spend that time? Do you want to, how do you want to, because when you're younger, it seems like it's an infinite time horizon. And having friends who have passed, I have friends who, have had their bouts with cancer, knock on wood, I am healthy, but you really have that uncertainty. So you want to make sure that you're enjoying all of those things. And for me professionally, it is cliche to say if you do what you love, it's not really work. That is the thing. So if I had, the no option of failure, I'd probably be doing the same thing I am right now. And I know that's boring, but I think that's also if you can work in your life and professional existence to get to that point where you can do those things and like you do this wonderful podcast, talk to entrepreneurs and get that. I think if you can do those things, I mean everything else kind of becomes straightforward. It's a lot easier.
I will say that I totally agree. I love that thought. I think that's fair. It may be a boring answer, but I've heard it before. It's okay, and I get it. I very much respect and relate to that sentiment. And there's other people who maybe would be in our same shoes and not enjoy it as much,
Yeah.
right? Like it's just something that I would eat, sleep, and breathe business 24 hours a day if I had like a clone of myself to do the other stuff in life because I'd love it. I just love it too. I love it very much, and I love the challenge of it, and the freedom and all that stuff that comes with it. So I think it's a fair answer. And you've built a lot of really cool stuff. You kept mentioning how old you are. I think you look great for 55, by the way. So keep up what you're doing. I hope we get to hang out more and talk about
Yeah.
Bucks County and like what we could do here. But you're awesome. If people heard anything today that they want to reach out to you about specifically, how do they reach you directly?
I mean, you can add me on LinkedIn and pop me a message there. You can also, my personal email is detansin at gmail.com. You're welcome to pop a note there. I'm always willing, especially within Bucks and even in Montgomery and the region, if an entrepreneur wants to sit down and bounce some ideas, I'm always open to that. I mean, I look at the people who are helpful in my mentorship thing, and for me, it's a pay it forward thing. So if you want to grab a cup of coffee or walk through some ideas and things, what you're doing, I'm try to make myself open available for that when I can.
Beautiful. All right. You're awesome. Thank you for being on. The best of luck. We'll catch up with you soon and have a great rest of your week. All right.
Thank you, Jay, so much.
Thanks, Ed. See you.